It's Friday on Bet. That means the weekend is nigh, but we still got to earn our paycheck for the next 30 minutes. I'm Tyler Fulghum. She is Erin Dolan. Going to be rocking with you here to get you set for Friday night and the weekend to come across the betting landscape. The NBA playoffs will actually start. Play-in games don't technically count, Erin. We will break it down with a couple of NBA insiders here on this edition of Bet. We will talk about the NFL draft forthcoming, and then we'll have something on the way out the door as a sucker bet for you to whet your appetite. You see right there, youtube.com/ESPN Sports Betting. The suits like me to pump that so that I can get a little extra bonus in my paycheck. Erin, are you ready for a Friday edition of Bet, girl?
I am ready for it, Tyler. I feel like you have this great Friday energy.
It's Friday. Come on. It's not Monday. It's Friday, baby. The weekend is nigh, and I got some weekend plans. So let me earn a little extra walking around money for the weekend. Let's start with the NFL draft. You know I'm a big draft Nick here, Erin. So what we're going to do is play a game of take your pick, basically. We're going to give you 3 draft prospects, and you tell me whether or not you're going over or under, essentially, their draft prop. So let's start first and foremost with NC State offensive lineman Ike Ekwonu. He is the favorite to be the first offensive lineman off the board. His draft position prop is 3 and a hook. So under means he's either drafted first, second, or third. Over means he's drafted 4th or later in the draft. So with Ekwonu, Erin, are you over or under?
I'm going to go over here. And it's so crazy how different this draft is going to look compared to last year when we were talking about all these crazy good quarterbacks. But the reason I'm saying over is because I actually think the Jets might take him with that number 4 spot. He makes a lot of sense in terms of going to New York, being able to protect Zach Wilson, who was sacked 44 times. There's so many other good players, and it feels like it's really hard to get into the minds of these NFL franchises and what they're actually looking for. There's one thing that we do know, and that's that the quarterback position is not very strong this season. But you do have a Houston Texans team right in front of them and the Detroit Lions that maybe are looking for a backup quarterback, for the near future, things like that. So we're not really sure what's going to happen there. But I would see him going over 3.5. But again, he's just such a great player. His only weakness, I would say, is just his, ability to mirror defenders. And that might be a little bit of a problem in the NFL. But I think he would go definitely in the top 10. But I think he'll go over 3.5 positions.
Yeah, I agree with you, Edie. I'm on the over as well. And, when we first started doing mock drafting a couple of months ago, it was like Ekwonu or Evan Neal. Who's going to go first to the Jacksonville Jaguars? Now we've seen kind of the makeup of this draft change because we've realized, and scouts have realized, this is a much deeper class at defensive line / edge rusher, at wide receiver, and at cornerback. And those offensive linemen have kind of slid down mock drafts because of that. So I think you're going to see at least 2, if not 3 defensive linemen go in the first 3 picks. I like the fit with the Jets there because he's a tremendous run blocker, and that will fit with what Robert Saleh wants to do in that offense. But I agree. Unlike a couple of weeks ago or a month ago, I think offensive linemen are getting pushed back throughout this pre-draft process. I'm going over 3.5. 4 is the earliest that Ekwonu will be selective. All right, let's go to one of the 2 potential first-round wide receivers coming from the Ohio State University. Garrett Wilson is actually the slight favorite to be the first wide receiver taken. His buddy Chris Olave has a draft prop of 17.5, though. Erin, over or under?
I'm going over on this one, and it's interesting because Ohio State is one of 3 programs to have multiple players in this year's draft. The other one, of course, is Alabama and Georgia. Now, if both of these players from Ohio State are able to go in the first round, it'll be the first time since the 2007 NFL draft, so it's been a while. Now, in terms of this, the reason I'm taking over is because, yes, Garrett Wilson, I think he'll be able to go in some other wide receivers before him, only because his role was really simplified at Ohio State because you had a player like Garrett Wilson also on the roster, so maybe we haven't seen his full potential, and NFL teams also know that, so I do think he would go higher than 17.5 draft positions.
Yeah, this one is the hardest of the 3 to answer for me, but I am on the opposite side. I would lean to the under here. I won't be surprised, Edie, if he does go over 17.5, but I'm going to say under because we just talked to Todd McShay on yesterday's Daily Wager, and he said he thinks both wide receivers come under their draft prop out of Ohio State. It's 10.5 for Garrett Wilson. It's 17.5 as we're discussing here for Olave. I don't think Olave is going to get past the Chargers at number 17. I think he'd be such a great fit alongside Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. He has the speed and the vertical ability that maybe those two don't have. That's obviously something you want with a weapon like Justin Herbert, who can chuck that thing over them mountains or over that Caesar's Palace behind me there. Got one of the strongest arms in the NFL. And I think that really complete the Charger offense to have a dynamic deep threat who can just get open at will with the savvy route running. I liken Olave to a Torrey Holt, who was a wide receiver for the greatest show on turf. Didn't win with anything but savvy route running. I think Olave can be that. And if he's available at 17, I think the Chargers would be wise to snap him up. All right, the final player we want to look at is Kayvon Thibodeau. He may be one of the more polarizing figures in this draft class. Long been considered a number one surefire overall pick. Now his draft prop has sunk to 5.5 as we are 2 weeks away. Erin, you going over under?
So I'm still going to go with the under here. Some people still arguing he's the best in the class. I mean, he can get at all linemen, whether they're fast, slow. I mean, he's such a good player. He's going to make an immediate impact no matter where he goes. I could see the Giants grabbing him if he's still available with that number 5 pick, which is why I wanted to go under 5.5. But you make a great point. I feel like a lot of people have been talking about this for the past couple of weeks of him potentially going number 1 overall. But again, it's starting to drip back just a little bit. But I do think he would go in the top 5. So I'm going to go with the under on this one.
I'm with you there too, ED. It's one of my favorite draft player props of the entire first round. I think it's just kind of crazy talk that he is slipping out of the top 5 because people are saying, well, does he actually love the game of football because he has other interests off the field? This guy is not quite, Myles Garrett, freak of nature, but he is 85-90% of that. Got the long arms, the tremendous burst and first step, ran a 4.58 40. Had production at Oregon, always produced there, and I think this is a guy who could end up being a better pro than college player once he's able to fully focus on the game of football. Again, when he was in high school, consensus number 1 overall pick. When he was 18, 19 years old, everyone said this will be the number 1 pick in the draft when he comes out, and he's done nothing to hurt that for me from a production and then a testing standpoint. So with there probably being a run on defensive ends with Hutchinson and Walker, the kid out of Georgia, being guys that are considered top 5 picks as well, I think that adds to the value of a team, whether it is the Jets, the Texans, the Giants, the Lions, whatever, taking Thibodeau in that top 5. He has met with 4 of the 5 teams that meet in the top 5. That also tells me something there, ED. I like under as well for Kayvon Thibodeau. All right, the draft, still a couple of weeks away. We got time for that. But the NBA playoff play-in is here, and the playoffs are nigh this weekend. So let's dive in with our good buddy. Welcome him back to the show, one of our favorites, Tim Bontemps, joining us here on this Friday edition of Bet. And Tim, I love the Declaration of Independence there behind you. We will get to the Philadelphia 76ers and their road in this playoffs in just a little bit, but we got to start with some news that you broke earlier today for us here on ESPN, and it's massive news for this playoff play-in game between the Clippers and the Pelicans. Paul George out for tonight's playoff play-in game as he enters health and safety protocols. What a massive blow for the Clippers, who've been playing great basketball with PG despite the loss to Minnesota. So the line has moved. The Clippers were 4-point favorites. Now they're a 1-point dog because of this. The total has pretty much stayed the same, which I find interesting. With this massive shift, how are you going to play this game?
It's really fascinating, Tyler. I still think this is a stay away for me, even with Paul George out, because as we've seen over the past couple of years, if there is a single team in the league that you were going to count on to play well with their stars out, it's these LA Clippers, right? You go back to last year's playoffs. Kawhi Leonard tears his ACL. He's out for the rest of the playoffs. It seems like the Utah Jazz are going to roll to the conference finals. What happens? Terrence Mann hits a million threes. The Clippers come back and win that series, and then they give the Suns a real test in the Western Conference Finals. And even this year, with Paul George out for most of the season, Kawhi Leonard out all season, this team still grounded out an above 500 record. They've got a bunch of long athletic wing players. They've got a guy in Norman Powell who can step into the lineup and give them 20-plus points, that's played in finals games before. And they've got Reggie Jackson, a guy that loves the spotlight, loves the opportunity to get up a bunch of shots with Paul George out of the lineup. So I certainly think if you're a Pelicans fan, you like your chances in this game. I have a slight lean towards the Pelicans winning. They've been much better since getting C.J. McCollum a few weeks ago at the trade deadline. But I just don't know if I'd probably just stay away from this one completely, because I just don't trust either of these teams because of how good the Clippers have been in adverse situations. And I still don't fully trust that the Pelicans have what it takes to win a playoff game on the road to get in the playoffs.
Tim, I definitely agree with you. I'm currently leaning towards the Pelicans, but this game is definitely hard to handicap. Now, if the Clippers do win, when are we likely to see Paul George back in the lineup against the Suns?
I think we're most likely going to see him be back for Game 3 next Friday night in L.A. when the series shifts back to Los Angeles from Phoenix. The fact that the Clippers play today and then go to Game 1 on Sunday and Game 2 on Tuesday, I think it's going to make it difficult for Paul George to get back on the court before then. Without getting too far into the weeds with the health and safety protocols and testing to get out of them if you test positive for COVID, as Paul George has, 5 days, which is be Tuesday, just is a really tight turnaround for that. So I think it's much more likely he'll be back for Game 3 of that series. And look, if you're a Clippers fan, or if you're the Clippers themselves, if you can win this game tonight, you steal one game on the road, then you have Paul George back, all of a sudden, they're going to think they have a chance to make this a real series. So it is not like last year when guys would be out for 10, 12, 14 days and things were a lot different. Now with this shorter window, obviously it'd be much better for the Clippers to have Paul George these next 3 games, assuming they win tonight. But it isn't quite the death blow that it would have been last season.
All right, Timmy, let's pivot to the Eastern Conference playoff play-in game. That'll feature, of course, the Cavs and the Hawks. This game in Cleveland, but it's the Hawks that are favored by a couple of points in this matchup. That's because Atlanta did win 3 of the 4 meetings that these teams played this season, but they never really saw Cleveland at full strength. So what can you tell us about who might be available for the Cavs in this one that we haven't seen on the court in a minute?
Well, Jared Allen should be back, Tyler. He's been out with a finger injury for several weeks, but he should be back for this game tonight. But you know why the Hawks are favored, Tyler? Because they're the much better team. And I unlike the other game where I didn't know how I felt about it, this one I feel very, very strongly that the Atlanta Hawks are going to win this game. I know people have talked about their road record not being great this year. But you go back to last year's playoffs, this team won multiple games at Madison Square Garden, won multiple games in Philadelphia, and I'm pretty sure they even got a game in Milwaukee in that Eastern Conference Finals against the Bucks. This is a battle-tested team, and Trae Young is the best player in this series by a significant amount. So I really like Atlanta to win this game, even with Jared Allen back on the court with Evan Mobley and with Darius Garland in the backcourt. It's been a great season for the Cavs, but I'll be pretty surprised if they're able to extend it into the playoffs past tonight's game against Atlanta.
All right, what about this Atlanta Hawks team and their, Erin, their postseason kind of experience that they had a season ago? They played really well in that postseason. Is that something you think can benefit them in this spot, even though they've struggled on the road this year, Tim?
Absolutely. This is a Cavs team that has not been in the playoffs without LeBron James since the 1990s. I think I was in middle school the last time they went to a playoff series without LeBron James, and they've been terrible the past few years. And like I said, this has been a phenomenal story that they've completely turned their franchise around. They have, I think, the Rookie of the Year in Evan Mobley. Jared Allen was a deserving All-Star selection, same with Darius Garland. But the Atlanta Hawks are just much better and deeper than them. And like I said, Trae Young is clearly the best player in this series. And we saw last year, like you mentioned, Tyler, time and time again in the playoffs, Trae Young had huge games, one after another after another. And I think tonight, in a big spot with a chance to go into the playoffs, I'll be pretty surprised if Trae doesn't have another big game, and I'll be equally surprised if Atlanta doesn't get this win and move on to face the Miami Heat on Sunday.
Tim Bontemps handling double duty for us here on Bet, talking about Paul George and that big blow for the LA Clippers, and then diving into both the Hawks and the Cavs as they get ready in the Eastern Conference playoff play-in game. Timmy B, as always, we appreciate your time and expertise here on Bet.
Thanks for having me, man.
Now, let's swing it over to Jamal Collier, who's joining us here on Bet. And Erin, I apologize. I did steal your question. In all honesty, I screwed up the questioning that I was supposed to ask Timmy Bontemps and Jamal Collier. But you kind of got an answer from Tim. I want to hear, Jamal, because you are with this Cavs team, pardon me, your thoughts on what they can do in this game. They haven't played a playoff game without LeBron James in Cleveland since 1998. That was a long time ago. So we know they struggled against Atlanta this season, losing 3 of 4. But they didn't see the Hawks at full strength. We heard what Tim had to say about Jared Allen. What can you tell us about his potential availability, Jamal, and how effective he may be with that finger against a team that's got a great rebounder in Click Capella?
I think all signs are pointing to the fact that Allen is going to be able to play and at least take the floor. He participated in the shoot around. There's been some optimism that they'll be able to have him at least for this game. Now, how effective he's going to be is going to be the key. They've just really struggled without him. They were one of the best stories in the first half of the season, 7-11 since he went out in March with that fractured finger, and he really makes this defense go. They were such a big physical defensive team when he was there in the middle, and if he can get back to that, I think we can potentially see a competitive game here tonight, and that the Cavs will have a chance to win. You mentioned how long it's been without LeBron. I think that the fans will be excited to have a playoff game or a meaningful play-in game in Cleveland tonight, and I'm expecting everybody to be jazzed up. But you're right, it's going to be such Jared Allen's health and availability is such a big swinging point for them, because if Mobley just coming back, not too long ago from injury for them, just really the injuries have derailed this Cavs team from really one of the best stories in the league to them sort of fighting for their playoff lives here. It should be a good one tonight. I think that they will see Jared Allen though in the lineup here. It looks optimistic in that way.
And the point guard battle between Atlanta Hawks' Trae Young as well as Darius Garland, that's going to be one to watch tonight. So how do you think this matchup is going to affect the outcome of tonight's game?
We really saw the way that Trae Young just sort of dictated everything against Charlotte. And, he's such a dynamic offensive player. He's competing for All-NBA. He got this team as far as they did last year, just off the strength of how dynamic Trae Young has been offensively. The Hawks have struggled on defense. They give up a ton of points. They've been one of the worst defensive teams in the league, and for the entire season. But Trae has been so good offensively. He's averaging more than 30 points a game against the Cavs. Of the teams that he's played more than twice, it's the second highest points per game average so far for him, right behind Milwaukee. And I think that trying to find a way to slow him down, they're going to send double. You saw Charlotte send double teams at him, send a little bit of everything to try to get him a different look. And really, Charlotte didn't do a good job of making him feel uncomfortable or getting him out of his comfort zone. The Hawks have been a team that a lot of those players got as deep as they did and made the playoff run last year, and that's all fueled by Trae. And he's got much more experience than Garland, but Garland has been incredible all season. This is really going to be a fun matchup to watch those two go at it, because I think Garland is certainly showing that first game against the Nets as well that he's ready for the big stage and ready to step up to try to lead his team in there. But for really the big thing for the Cleveland is if they can defensively find a way to neutralize Trae, and that's again where I think Jared Allen is going to be such a huge addition for them if he can come back and be effective tonight, because holding Trae to a reasonable number offensively is going to be a big key if they want to come out with a win here tonight.
Jamal Collier joining us here on Bet. I agree. Going to be fun to watch those 2 point guards go head to head. A spot in the playoffs as the 8th seed in the East on the line with the Cavs and the Hawks. Great stuff, Jamal. We appreciate you joining us here on Bet. Enjoy your Friday edition of these games and the playoffs all postseason long.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right, yeah, so we survived the poor hosting there, made it through, but thanks to Timmy B and Jamal, we are
fine.
wiser and smarter bettors because of the information that they're dropping. So let's get the show back on track, Erin Dolan. We are going to play another game of Take Your Pick. This time, though, we're moving to the association, and we're going to make these picks in these play-in games first and foremost. Let's start with that Eastern Conference matchup. We'll see it on ESPN tonight. It is the first game that will tip at 7:30 Eastern. You saw the line and the total. The Hawks a road favorite. Are you liking the road favorite here, ED, or is something else you want to attack?
No, I really do like the Hawks in this one, and I would definitely lay it. I know we talked about how, they're not great on the road, but I'm not really factoring that in here. They beat this team 3 times, and in those 3 wins, they were winning by an average margin of 12 points. The last time these two teams met, Trae Young went off. He had 30 points. So I'm actually also looking at his player prop over 41.5 points and assists. Now, we didn't hit this last time against Charlotte, but Charlotte was known to really limit Trae Young. Trae Young in a do-or-die situation is very scary, because I know it firsthand as a Philadelphia 76ers fan in that Game 7. He absolutely went off, and I think that's what he's going to do in this do-or-die. Now, I know with Jared Allen being back in the lineup, of course that's going to help them. In fact, the Cavs, they haven't played great down the stretch, and one of the reasons obviously is being because of Jared Allen, but they actually dropped from 5th in defensive rating all the way down to 24th in defensive rating, so they really need him back on the court. But with that said, he hasn't played in some time, so I don't expect him to come out and look absolutely amazing. The Hawks have more experience, like we talked about. I mean, they haven't been in the postseason or in the playoffs in so long. So I'm going to lay the points with the Hawks, and I also like Trae Young over 41.5 points and assists for tonight.
Yeah, I definitely understand the Trae Young prop. Is you make a great point. That narrative, that belief that we have from our past, just whenever it's been a do-or-die game, he's just absolutely going off. The Hawks have been a wagon, but this is a team that's now on the road, and we know they're a little bit different there. with those things kind of pulling me in opposite directions, I'll just attack the total. I'll go under 223 because we have seen every playoff play-in game go under the total, 4 for 4 in that regard. With this game being in Cleveland, we like that Cleveland can kind of dictate the style and tempo. You mentioned how their defensive rating had fallen off, but if they get Allen back, that's obviously a big key as to why over the course of the full 82-game season, this was Scott that was 4th in the NBA in home rating, defensive rating at home, pardon me, and they also were the 6th slowest paced team at home in the NBA. Meanwhile, that Hawks offense that is so awesome at home, second best offensive rating in the NBA, it drops from 117.7 to 113, which is still 8th in the NBA on the road, but that's 4 points per 100 possessions less than what they produce when they are at home. So all those things combine to make me comfortable going with the under 223 in this do-or-die matchup for these two teams. Now to that Western Conference playoff play-in game that we were discussing with Timmy Bontemps. The line has moved 5 points through that key number of 0 with the Paul George news being out. The Clippers go from a 4-point favorite to a 1-point dog. How you looking at this one, Erin?
I'm going with the Pelicans money line, and I also have a player prop. But let's first talk about the side for this one. Yes, it swung in a big way, but it makes a lot of sense considering Paul George is not going to be in the lineup. In the 3 matchups the Pelicans played against the Clippers, they won those games when Paul George was not in the lineup by an average of 19.3 points. Now they have CJ McCollum entering into the lineup. He could have a huge game. Jonas Valanciunas, he's awesome. That's one of my favorite player props. I like him over 32.5 points and rebounds. He has a combined 36 average when playing this team for points and rebounds, and he's hit over this in 3 of 4 games. The one game he didn't hit over it was the most recent game, but he only played 22 minutes in that game, so I expect him to play a ton of minutes tonight. Again, do or die type of situation. It's really unfortunate for Paul George, but I do think being that we do have a sample size of the Pelicans playing this team without him, we can see how tragic it was for them, losing again by an average margin of 19.3 points. So I lean that way, but also I really think you can take advantage of live betting situations if you don't feel comfortable betting before the game. And also I really do like that Jonas Valanciunas prop of over 32.5 points and rebounds.
Yeah, I like you, like the Pelicans side with the Paul George injury. But again, I'm just going to ride this trend until it stops working in these playoff playing games. Under 215.5. When Paul George was announced out, the total didn't move. It stayed at 215.5. That's a lot of offense that's coming off the floor for the Clippers. So you consider that neither of these teams is particularly fast in pace. The Clippers are 17th. The New Orleans Pelicans are 21st. And this stat kind of shocked me. When I looked at the entire regular season, all 82 games, only the Dallas Mavericks had a higher under rate than the New Orleans Pelicans. We love betting unders with the Mavericks. Only they had a higher under rate than the Pelicans. The Pelicans have been an under team. And with George out for that offense in LA, I like the under here in this playoff play-in because, again, it's 4 for 4 thus far. All right, as promised now, another game of Take Your Pick. We did the NFL draft version earlier in the show. It's now time to take our pick with some NBA playoff prop bets. So let's look at this matchup we'll see in the Western Conference. A 2-7 matchup between Karl Anthony Towns, the T-Wolves, Ja Morant, and the Grizz. Game 1 point prop, take your pick. Cat over 24.5 or Ja over 28.5.
I'm going Karl Anthony Towns over in this one. Now, Ja Morant is averaging 20 points when facing this team in 4 games played. They've really been able to limit him. Also, on top of that, we talked about this a few times in the show. Some of the player props for these games seem to be super inflated. Now, Karl Anthony Towns is averaging 23 points, so it's a little bit closer than that 20 points that Ja is averaging compared to his 28.5 point player prop. But I do think Karl Anthony Towns, he's hit over this in 3 of 5 games, so I'm going to go with him in this one.
Yeah, I agree with you here, Aaron. People may think we're crazy because he had such a poor game against the LA Clippers despite them winning, had all that foul trouble, and Ja is such a beast. But Ja is going to get the Pat Beverly treatment. Pat Beverly makes it easy on no one to score buckets. I think the Grizz will win, and they'll have offensive output, but Ja might need to facilitate more than score in this particular matchup because of Beverly. We have a lower threshold with Cat. I'm expecting a bounce back, even though his matchup is not easy with Steven Adams and Jaren Jackson Jr. I, like you, think Cat is the pick you need to make here. All right, let's go to a couple of Philadelphia 76ers you may be interested in watching in their first-round matchup against the Toronto Raptors. Take your pick over 2.5 made threes in Game 1 against Toronto. You got your boy Tyrese Maxey or your boy James Harden. Take your pick.
I'm going with Tyrese Maxey here. Now, he went 4 for 5 the last time these two teams met not too long ago, but he didn't hit over this in the other 3 matchups against Toronto. As for James Harden, he can go cold. He has not come close to even hitting over this made threes prop, so I think Tyrese Maxey has a better chance, more likely to happen. Again, I don't really think either of these players will go over that because the Raptors can defend the 3 pretty well. It's going to be a great matchup, but I would go with Tyrese Maxey here.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you here as well. Tyrese Maxey's just been a better offensive player, a better shooter than James Harden since Harden joined the Philadelphia 76ers. Harden's been cold. He has not shot the ball well from the field. He has not shot the ball well from downtown. He only averaged 15 points per game against this Toronto Raptors team when he played them twice after joining the Philadelphia 76ers. We get an extra 15 cents of a return for the Maxey play as well. And again, he's just been shooting the ball better and more efficiently than James Harden. So all those things considered, I don't know if either gets to 3 against this Toronto defense, but I'd much rather bet on Tyrese Maxey at a better price than James Harden, who has been struggling. All right, last take your pick with this Nets and Celtics matchup. Okay, first to 20 points in game 1. You have the Celtics as the overwhelming favorite to do so at minus 140. You can get KD and Kyrie at plus 110. Take your pick, Erin. Which one you like?
I would go with the plus money here, only because the Brooklyn Nets, the last time these two teams met, put up 40 points in that opening quarter. Now, I know the Nets, they're hit or miss, and also Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are both coming off games where they were absolutely impeccable in terms of shooting. They could not miss, so we might see some regression there. But I also think the Brooklyn Nets, they have something more to play for in this first game than the Boston Celtics. Everybody's been talking about the Nets all season. They finally are dropping in terms of their title odds. And on all the markets, all the talk is about the Boston Celtics easily being able to knock this team out. But at the same time, I don't really know the status of Robert Williams still for this first game, So I do think the Brooklyn Nets, they can jump out. I think they'll play with a lot of grit in this one. And I think they could be the first to 20 points.
Yeah, Erin, I agree with you here. We know how much I love Boston and their defense, but this is about pricing. First to 20, and I have to lay 140 with the Celtics without Robert Williams to try and defend the rim against Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant drives. I'm sorry, but this pricing just seems off. I do think the Celtics are the better team. I do think they make it first to 20, 54 times out of 100 if you played this first quarter 100 times. But come on, plus price on Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving just to have a hot start. I think over the course of 48 minutes, that Celtics defense will show up and shut them down. But anything can happen over the first, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes of a basketball game. KD and Kyrie can get hot, and I get them at plus money. That, to me, is why I, like you, would take my pick and rather select the Nets at plus 110 rather than the Boston Celtics at minus 140. So we're in agreement there on take your pick. All right, finally, one last thing to do before we get out of here. One of our favorite segments. It's called Sucker Bet. You know the deal. It may seem like a good bet on its surface, but once you take that wrapper off and get your first lick of the lollipop, oh, that's gross. Get it out of here. So you tell me, Erin, a sucker bet that you want to share with our listeners that may seem sweet, but is actually nasty.
A sucker bet would be taking the Brooklyn Nets to win it all because they're currently a plus 900. They're dropping back. So as soon as the series opened against Boston, the lines came out. They dropped back to their longest odds of plus 750. Then yesterday was plus 850. They're now plus 900, and the Boston Celtics are at plus 850. All season long, everybody's been talking about the Brooklyn Nets and trying to get the best possible value on them. This is the longest odds that we have seen it at. And a lot of people thinking, well, maybe they will be able to upset the Celtics and continue to advance. The Brooklyn Nets, as I've been saying for the past couple of months, they are not going to win it all. There are so many good teams in the Western Conference, let alone in the Eastern Conference, and the different steps they have to get through in order to get there. I mean, they don't also have Ben Simmons. They've been talking about this, so he could potentially be coming into the lineup. But he hasn't played for a year, also having issues with his back. So a sucker bet would be thinking the Nets would win the NBA title this season when you're seeing it at plus 900.
Yeah, could not agree with you more. I don't think they make it out of the first round. So I agree that is an absolute sucker bet. I'm going to go back to that NFL draft for a sucker bet. And the over-under on number of offensive linemen drafted in the first round is 7.5. And the over's got a nice plus 110 price. That's juicy. We like that. But that's a sucker play. Okay, listen, we talked about offensive linemen sliding back as defensive linemen, wide receivers, and DBs climb the board. In Mel Kiper's latest mock, only 6 offensive linemen went in the first round. We could add another and still win this bet. And again, the positional value is just not there. So don't be fooled by the price, which looks nice and tidy. There will not be 8 offensive linemen drafted in the first round. I'm Tyler Fulghum. She's Erin Dolan. That's another Friday edition of Bet. Sorry, wrong way. Hey, AD, good luck to your Sixers this weekend, my friend. Everyone enjoy the NBA
Thank you. I'll need it.